These days, it feels like Dragonhunter has fallen off compared to other Guardian specs. Even from a lore standpoint, the Dragon cycle is over, so we have no use for the Dragonhunters anymore. But I think any true Dragonhunter will learn to adapt and live on. Today, I bring you a Dragonhunter build that doesn't hunt dragons, it hunts with dragons. Okay, so right off the bat, I gotta throw out a little disclaimer sort of thing. This is by no means a top DPS, top performing, efficient solo build of any kind. This is just a build for fun. We're just out here having some fun today. I've been messing around with this build in the open world and I realized, well damn, I'm having fun with it. And there's an old saying that goes, you can't beat someone who's having fun. Okay, so we're running a pretty standard power Dragonhunter setup, but we can get into the specs and stats a little bit later because I want to start off with what really makes this build different and fun. And that comes from the skyscale and Relic of the Cavalier. Thanks to this combo, we can take a unique spin on combat. Relic of the Cavalier applies lots of boons when using a mount's engage skill, and Blast from the skyscale can trigger this effect multiple times. You see, Blast puts down a fire field that will hit 4 times. Since Relic of the Cavalier has no cooldown, it can trigger the Relic effect 4 times. And the result is a huge stack of boons. And if you hit a big group of enemies, it just gets downright silly the amount of boons you get. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Blast doesn't have a target limit, but it goes even further than that. If you have the combat launch mastery unlocked, you can mount up in combat and hit them again for a second round of boons. It all makes sense, doesn't it? Dragon hunters hunting with dragons. Now, landing hits on Blast is very important, so it's worth taking some time to figure out how to properly aim it. Because if you miss with it, you miss out on the whole point of even using this relic. According to the wiki, the center of the blast field is approximately 480 units away from the direction you are facing, with a radius of 240. So just practice with it, get used to that distance so you can get more consistent with it and hopefully hit all 4 times every time. If you don't hit quite right with it, it can be useful to stay in it to kite enemies back in, or you can just use Greatsword 5 to pull them in. It's also worth noting that the combat launch ability has a 3-minute cooldown, so you're not going to be able to spam this or use it constantly. Personally, I only really use it in a long drawn-out fight where I feel like I can benefit from a second hit of boons. And on the topic of combat launch, you need to be careful where you use it. It will launch you up in the air before mounting, so if you don't have enough overhead clearance, it'll actually fail to mount. The skill gets interrupted, you get that not enough space to mount message, and it will put the skill on cooldown. If you are fighting solo and you do use combat launch, it's important not to fly too high or too far. If you do, you could end up flying out of range of whatever it is you're fighting, and then combat is just gonna reset, which won't be an issue if there's other people around also fighting, but it's good to know. You may have to make some of these mistakes yourself so you can learn for yourself the best way to use your skyscale. Like I said, just practice with it. Okay, now for those who are interested, we can talk about the specs and stats of the build. Like I said before, it's pretty standard. We're running Greatsword Longbow, both with Force and Strength sigils, Berserker weapons, Dragon on everything else. You can also go with an Assassin amulet if you want. We take these stats since all we care about here is power damage, and that's what Dragonhunter makes use of the best. For runes, we have a few options: Scholar, Dragonhunter, Ranger, maybe even Eagle for a budget option. I've been using Ranger, but honestly, you can pick any of these. The difference in DPS really won't be very much. Okay, on the traits, we have a pretty typical setup for a Virtue's Dragonhunter. Virtue's Dragonhunter actually feels pretty good right now. There's not a whole lot to break down and discuss here. Pretty much everything we take is some sort of damage increase. On the Dragonhunter line, we have bottom, middle, bottom, Soaring Devastation for the movement speed increase. Guardian is pretty slow, so anywhere you can get a movement speed increase is great. Zealot's Aggression, a damage increase against crippled foes. And Big Game Hunter, another damage increase as long as your target is tethered with your spear, which is something we're going to try to do as much as possible. In Zeal, we go middle, middle, bottom. Fiery Wrath, a damage increase against burning foes. We aren't focused on burning with this build, but we still apply burning because of Virtue of Justice. Zealous Blade, a power increase increased even more while wielding greatsword, and it lowers greatsword cooldowns. And Symbolic Avenger, we're gonna cast our symbols pretty much off cooldown, so we will get this damage bonus pretty much all the time. And in virtues, we go top, top, bottom. Unscathed Contender, another big damage increase. Inspiring Virtue, a damage increase after using one of your virtues. And Indomitable Courage, that way our Shield of Courage will be a stun break, so we don't have to worry about slotting a stun break onto our skill bar. Also, the other two traits here don't really do much for this build. Okay, for the skills, Litany of Wrath is still the best Guardian heal. You need to take this. For the elite skill, we're using Dragon's Maw, obviously, so we can keep up with the dragon theme. And for utilities, like I said, this is a build for fun, so you could just run whatever you want. I typically go with the standard Bane Signet, Procession of Blades, and Sword of Justice. A few other picks could be Test of Faith, Advance, Light's Judgment can be fun, or hey, maybe go all traps to complete the full Dragonhunter roleplay. Now, if you find maybe you want to switch up the weapons a bit, dual swords can be pretty fun with this build too. It brings a bit more mobility and they hit really fast and really hard. And in that case, the stats and sigils would just stay the same. Okay, so let's do a quick DPS check here just to show off the burst potential and the sort of the ideal way to play this build. We're just going to engage with the skyscale, get all our damage buffs active, and then just hit it with everything we got. I'm just going to stay on greatsword for this test, and I'm just going to hit it with one round of everything and then just fill with auto attacks. We're not going to try hard this. We're just going to go casual, see what we can get. Drop some symbols, damage buffs, okay, and then fill with auto attacks. What do we get? Oh, big! 29k. I mean, hey, for a casual, fun to play build, I think that's quite good. And then of course, you know, we can combat launch, try to stay in range, drop another field. Ooh, almost missed. And then go again for another round. Okay, now with this build, I think you will just have to temper your expectations a bit. You won't be topping out the DPS charts, being a benefit to your party, or soloing things. For the record, I've been able to solo things with this build, but not very well. It's a very awkward time trying to solo with this build. You can treat that as a personal challenge if you want. The final two pieces of this build come in the form of fashion. Since we're taking on the role of a true dragon hunter, it is mandatory to have some sort of dragon-themed armor skin. It's non-negotiable. And finally, your skyscale. You have to have a cool skyscale skin if you want to use this build. Everybody knows cool skin equals better gameplay. So if you don't have one yet, go out and buy one. I don't want to see anybody using that standard gray skyscale with this build. You can miss me with that. Anyways, I hope you found this interesting and that maybe you too can have some fun with this build. I hope to see you later in another video, and I hope to see you flying through the skies running this build.